Hi, I'm Jess Minton. I'm a project manager with DAS42, and I've been helping clients see and understand and get timely information out of their data.
I'm Teresa Kovich, a principal consultant and solution architect with DAS42. And I'm also a Snowflake certified generative AI specialist.
Today, we'll be discussing our approach to data modernization with AI and Snowflake. So, Teresa, we're seeing companies rush to implement AI everywhere. Can we talk about the difference between a company that is doing AI very well versus one that's just checking the box?
Yeah, I do think a lot of what we're seeing right now is that there are sort of mandates coming down from senior leadership. We got to be using AI, but there's not necessarily a clear vision of what is it that we want to accomplish with this. And I think much of DAS42's philosophy, not just around AI, but around data in general, is about understanding your data and asking the right questions. So I think when you come at it from a perspective of you just want to check the box, you're definitely not going to get the best value out of AI because you're going to get different approaches across different departments. You're probably going to have a lot of sprawl in terms of your spend and the number of tools that you're using. And so I think coming in with not just an AI and technical strategy, and we want to do these things, but with this is the outcome that we want to see is really important to us and to our clients. So when someone is able to say, we are looking to improve our customers' experience with AI, or we are looking to increase efficiency with AI, even something as small as that, even something as, of course, everyone wants to improve customer experience and increase efficiency. But coming at it with a company statement of, this is what we want to accomplish can help you to lay out the landscape of, okay, where do we look first? Because it's a very overwhelming ecosystem and stratosphere right now.
Absolutely. In the AI42 framework, you talk about AI readiness, and it sounds like setting your goals, knowing your objectives is a pretty good place to start. What are some of the most common attributes you see when companies are actually ready to begin an AI journey?
So I think that there are a lot of stepping stones towards AI readiness, and a lot of companies that are wanting to adopt AI and that are interested in and passionate about technology have taken some of the first steps of, let's create a data warehouse and let's do, some degree of governance. But I think when you think about the outcomes that you want to get from AI, very common saying, I have heard it more in the past year than in years past, and that will be no surprise to people. There's a lot of garbage in, garbage out. And so you're looking not just at, I need to have a huge volume of data and I need to know what it is, but I also need to know what problems are in it. Are there times when pipelines go down and we miss data for a certain span of time that a machine learning algorithm might read as, you didn't have any website traffic in these 15 minutes. So, making sure that you're ready for getting insights that are actually meaningful, that you understand some of those nuances and data quality issues that you might have. But I will also say that an interesting approach that I've been looking at with some of my clients is, can you use AI to understand your data better to get you ready for other AI use cases? So using AI and Snowflake Catalog and Snowflake Cortex technology to do data profiling and to do anomaly detection and these sorts of things can be introductory steps that can get you towards doing meaningful churn prediction and things like that are going to be more business impactful. But you can start with some of those tech impactful things to get you moving in that direction.
It's amazing how after so many years of working with data and all of our the evolution of the data space, that the foundations of having good data quality are still the most important.
I know that it's very frustrating for people sometimes. And, you've been through this big, 2.5 year initiative for modernizing your data and governing your data. And then you try to implement something and you come across something that you hadn't realized before, or you start using a new technology. And so now you need to migrate over, some process from this to that, change something in the pipeline, and that throws something else off. And there are all sorts of interdependencies that can definitely get in the way of smooth adoption for these things. But also a lot of it is, some of this work is not particularly jazzy, that you need to decide what a null value means. Like that's not everyone's idea of a fun day at work. So I think that we definitely see, people being frustrated or people saying, "Oh, we've done this already. We've got it covered." But you had it covered for this use case, and it's going to be a different set of problems that you're going to come across for that one and that one and that one, because you can't possibly govern every data point that you have all at one time. It has to be something that you do gradually over time. You have a culture of, data reliability and organizational change management.
That's a great and impactful story. I think you talked about something that's so important to me, which is where people intersect with data and technology. And I think that's where there is so much potential for AI in our current environment, both for some of those mundane tasks that I'm sure many of us would be happy to hand off to a non-person. Some of that boring data cleanup, wouldn't that be amazing to hand off to an AI agent? And also to so many more strategic things that we might not be able to see on our own, or with a certain scale of data that is suddenly possible to process. So that I think is really exciting. So many of the DAS42 clients are using Snowflake as part of their data ecosystem. What Snowflake AI capabilities are you most excited about?
Snowflake last year launched the Snowflake Intelligence capability. And this is something that I have seen my clients looking for a long time. And there are other BI tools that have been trying to get at this, but not quite able to reach the level that I think I'm seeing from Snowflake Intelligence. So what Snowflake Intelligence does is it provides a natural language interface with your data. And this can be structured data, unstructured data, or a combination of them. So, whether it's a data warehouse or a bunch of PDFs that have, legalese documents in them, you can come in and say, I want to understand what our average contract value is. And Snowflake Intelligence, through an interface that your engineers will build that gives it the necessary business context, will basically write the SQL that you need and look through the documents that you need and come back and provide an answer also in natural language. And one of the things that I really, really love when I'm looking at the Snowflake Intelligence capability is the thoughtfulness with which it explains its assumptions and its processes, and the level of customization. Snowflake has been working with people in their data problems for a decade now. And so they're very well aware of some of the common problems being, well, sales calls this metric X and marketing calls it Y. So there's a layer in there that allows you to put in aliases for things, to explain nuances, to say, if someone doesn't define a time period, assume that they mean the last complete calendar year. Or if someone doesn't define a time period, clarify with them what time period they want, that's one that I think I was really pleased to see, because it would be easy for Snowflake to say, well, we just want to run the query. And then, if they go, oh, wait, no, I didn't want it for last year. I wanted it for the last 3 years. Then they run another query, and that, drives up Snowflake compute cost. And hypothetically, that's good for Snowflake, but it's not good for Snowflake. And Snowflake knows that because, as with many other technologies that they've come out with, you can see layered, woven into the product, that they are thinking about the user experience of it because they themselves are also using it in their business day in, day out. And so with Snowflake, even something like, new functions that get released. So recently they came out with group by all. And anyone who's been writing SQL has been waiting for group by all for years because it's exhausting when you write a query to say group by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 19. You know what I have to group by. There's no other choice. Just group by all. Snowflake did it, and so again, those are just the kind of things that that I look at with Snowflake, both big things like Snowflake Intelligence and small features like group by all that are huge quality of life improvements for people at all levels of the data ecosystem.
We talked about having good data quality as being essential for the foundation for AI solutions. What then makes Snowflake a good foundation for building AI apps?
One of the things that I think is hugely valuable about Snowflake. So you, as a Snowflake customer, Snowflake is not your only cloud, and they know that. They don't want Snowflake to be your email and your calendar and your everything. They're not trying to be everything. So they know that you're going to be using AWS or Microsoft or Google as well. And they know that you're going to be using other outside tools, and the interoperability of Snowflake with these other tools really allows you to, it's sort of like a choose your own adventure book. You go, do I want to use Snowflake for ingesting data, or do I want to use Fivetran? Do I want to use Streamlit in Snowflake to build an application, or do I want to use, Sigma or Hex on top of Snowflake? And Snowflake is not penalizing you for not choosing Snowflake at every step of the way. They are making it simple for you to integrate the parts of Snowflake that are valuable to you and that you want and that you're ready for at the time into whatever other pieces of the platform you're using. So I think that is one of my favorite things about Snowflake is, you sort of pick and choose the elements that you want to use, and then the rest of it still works streamlessly. And there are definitely other competitors to Snowflake that I see out there that are not at all with that approach. And that, if you don't have, the data warehouse of this cloud provider, then you can't use this connector or this functionality in this BI tool. And, all of the new features are going to roll out to people who are, full stack on your cloud first. That's just not how Snowflake operates.
I can see that being a big advantage when you're trying to decide which problem to tackle with AI and how you're going to do that. With Snowflake at your core, then you can use all the other systems as you need to, as opposed to potentially needing to shift again just to build an AI solution. That's a really good point. Let's talk about LLMs for a moment. So I think with the advent of things like ChatGPT and Claude, LLMs are suddenly very familiar to people. And there's been a huge focus from the media, even the Associated Press and USA Today and other media companies are taking advantage of retrieval augmented generation as a new revenue generator. So it's fascinating to think about not only solving our internal problems, but also creating new revenue streams with this new technology. From your perspective, when does it actually make sense to use an LLM versus some other AI approach?
It's a really great question. I think when I'm looking at a problem and saying, which is the right tool for this, I have multiple different directions that I can go. And I'm gonna expand the question that you asked slightly. I'm gonna say, so I'm looking at a problem and I go, do I want to use an LLM or AI functionality for this? Or do I want to use something completely other, not an LLM and not another AI tool? My two first deciding factors on whether I want to automate this or use AI for this is this something that the processes that we have today that humans enjoy this? And is this something that humans are genuinely good at? And if the answer to both of these or one of these is no, then I look towards an AI solution. I will say if the answer is yes, I don't want to take away joy from people's lives. And I don't think that a lot of big employers out there do either. I think that's one of the things I've seen at some of the conferences that we've been to. I'll be talking to other technical people, and I've talked about this with people in CIO positions or chief data officer positions, and they're very cynical about, no, businesses just want money. They just want, but businesses are made up of people, and the people who I'm talking to in business do not want to make their workforce unhappy. They know that that's not going to have a positive outcome for them. So what we're looking for, and you alluded to this earlier, Jess, is look at things that people would be happy to hand off, or maybe it is a part of someone's job that they enjoy, but humans are not uniquely suited to it. So an example of that would be looking through 400 pages of documentation on a health insurance plan and finding this particular clause that applies to this particular person. That is actually a fantastic use case for retrieval augmented generation with a large language model and human augmentation. So one of the examples that we've talked about with one of our clients, they have a call center that is seasonally available. And, during their peak season, they have a lot of people calling in with questions about their plan. And they were going, could we create a chatbot that could do this and that could just look, a lot of times they want to answer one of these 10 questions. And then other times it's something that these seasonal workers are looking at a 400-page document trying to find the right answer. They might not find it. They might not understand all the nuances because they might not be experts in this. Implement a chatbot, and I don't think I have to say, I think everyone knows what the experience of a chatbot can be. Sometimes it can be very frustrating. So one of the approaches that we've talked about with them is an augmented approach. So you create a chatbot that uses retrieval augmented generation. So here's your 400-page document, and you segment it up and give it vectors, and then you are able to point your large language model to look at that document. Then when someone asks a question, it takes the vector of that question and compares it to the document, and it comes back with an answer, and then give that answer to the human who can interpret it, go to the right page of the document and get further context if it's necessary, and give it back to another human. So, the piece of that people aren't good at was not talking to another person or interacting with another person, making that person feel valuable. It was looking through a 400-page document for the answer. So automate that part.
I think we've all seen Snowflake as a very powerful data platform. Teresa, can you tell us about an example of a company that you've worked with where you saw Snowflake and the implementation of a great data process really make an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite projects that I've worked on was with the National Marrow Donor Project. So for anyone who's not familiar with that organization, they help people who need life-saving transplants of marrow and blood products. They help connect those patients to potential donors who are not related to them. So a patient comes to them and says, I have leukemia, nobody in my family is able to be a match, and the match is able to go to their nationwide, international, in some cases, registry and find someone across the country, in a completely different walk of life who's willing to give, in many cases, just blood stem cells or marrow and save their lives. So very exciting project, really impactful. And one of the things that I think they did really well was connecting. They had 5 organizational metrics, and they helped to connect those to their frontline staff in a really impactful way, and made sure that every department's work was sort of represented in one of those metrics. But what we were able to help them do was take it one step further so that each individual could really genuinely see in a dashboard, in reporting, the impact of the call that they made that day, the impact that they're having on saving lives or on, raising money to help people be able to pay for the cost of parking at their chemotherapy treatments, or those sorts of things. So again, really connecting the individual's work all the way up to the organization's goals. So I think that's one of the ways that we really try to encourage organizational change management in companies and organizations around this, and being very thoughtful about not having data as this, precious hoarded substance that's only for executives, but really, generalizing it and having it be available to genuinely everyone.
I think that's an amazing example of what it looks like when we are in practice solving problems with data. Both are intended and some of the amazing unintended outcomes. Obviously, there are a lot of data consultancies out there. Teresa, you've been with DAS42 for 9 years. From your perspective, what makes a DAS42 approach different, and why do you think that matters to our clients?
One of the things that I'm really proud of about our approach is we are very dedicated to the perspective of we're not going to be here with you forever. We're here to do a job, and then we train your full-time engineers on how to do it. We build it in such a way that it's very scalable, and then we hand it off at the end. And we know that the quality of our work speaks for itself, and that the next time that that company or organization has a big data project, that they'll call on us again. I think what we see from a lot of the larger consultancies is that they're not incentivized to get in and out. They're incentivized to stay as long as they can and drag it out and make it very difficult for the internal companies, the companies that they're working with, and to take over the product at the end. And I think that's, to some extent, it's the nature of business. People are used to it. And there are definitely companies that want that. They don't want to have their own full-time data team managing absolutely everything. They want their data team to work on, maybe exciting or high impact things, or, work on the next product feature. And then you can have a consulting firm come in and do the sort of like keeping the lights on activities that are maybe not as interesting. And that's just not necessarily the approach that we take. Of course, we are happy to stay with a client for as long as they have meaningful work for us. But from the very beginning, every project that we do, we're bringing the client in. We're making sure that they feel ownership over this. This is not something that is, later going to be thought of as, that DAS42 tool. This is a business insider tool. This is a be the match tool. This is theirs. And I'm really proud of that. And I think it makes for more interesting work for me. I get to work on a lot of different clients. There's not really there's not a lot of people at DAS42 who are in a mindset of, okay, I'm a consultant, but I'm actually just going to work at this company for the next 30 years. I'm just going to do it as a consultant, which, I think that happens a lot in a lot of the larger firms. So we get to, it's good for us. It's good for our clients. And definitely I've seen that as a differentiator.
You said something interesting about delivering a product. And I think that to me is a differentiator. It is not the way that other practices necessarily think about their work. So when we deliver something, we're handing over the keys to a new asset that belongs to the client, as opposed to spending our time doing work. And I do think that is very unique for our philosophy. Let's transition to talking about data governance. At the very beginning, we talked about data quality being so important. And I think data governance is sort of the second half of data quality. It's making sure that your data stays of high quality. And it has a reputation for being very bureaucratic and slowing things down and adding a lot of red tape. How do you approach governance from a practical point of view? And why do you think that's different?
I think that I have seen approaches that are, I will say, I have seen approaches that are both a very bureaucratic approach to data governance and very effective. But I do think that sometimes it's not the right fit for the organization. It gets bogged down. If people are not interested in what they're talking about, if we're talking about, what metadata we're adding to a pipeline, and the people that you have in the conversation are not necessarily the right people to be having that conversation. The business doesn't necessarily care if you keep the created at and updated at timestamps, but your data engineers are going to know. So one piece of it is definitely having the right people in the room who are making the decision and not trying to make it too universal and too, everyone needs to be involved. So I think that is one thing that we're very careful about with data governance, is making sure that if there is someone who cares about this definition, I don't care what their role is. I want them in the conversation. If that's, a person on the front line, if that's someone who's, making phone calls and, doing reports day in, day out, and, they're not a senior executive, it doesn't matter to me. If they have an opinion on this, that means something.
Have you ever experienced a non-bureaucratic data governance process where actually data governance turned into a big benefit and sped things up?
Absolutely. So I think the ideal state for me is, if we are doing data governance along with something else that's important, and we do it in one area, and then in that area, we see the benefit of it. So there was a project that I worked on when the client was transitioning from Google Analytics 360 to GA4. This was a push transition from Google. Google was deprecating the previous product. And so the client went, okay, we have until this date to switch everything over. While we're at it, let's take a careful look at what we've done in GA360. Let's not just lift and shift it. And they found problems that they had. They found, things that were being calculated in ways that they hadn't realized. And just that there was a lot going on that had built up over time that, I think many of us who work in technology have worked with some sort of Frankenstein's monster at some point in time, of something that's just been pieced together over time. You throw this bit on and you throw that bit on, and
you just triggered everyone.
Yeah, like you look at the whole thing and you're like, what is this? So you don't look at the whole thing. And so I think taking that sort of piecemeal approach and going, let's look at this slice of the pie. Let's see what's going on here. And let's be willing to say that we were wrong. That was really the fundamentals of it. We didn't introduce a ton of bureaucracy or even a ton of, excessive documentation or those sorts of things. We just really tried to look at it from a matter of fact perspective of like, what do we want in the new system? What's going to be scalable? Is this going to result in, we were able to run the two pipelines side by side for a while. So we were able to say, here are the differences in how it's being captured in this system versus that system. And, that was what they needed for it. But I do think it's a very customized approach. There's not necessarily a one size fits all.
I can see all of those being assets as we continue to see more by way of AI. And you want to make sure that all of your data is trustworthy. Your AI outputs will only be trustworthy if you trust the underlying data. So that's why I wanted to probe into that a little bit more. And I think if Snowflake is supporting all of those levels of governance, that's going to be critical.
The other one that I will call out is the semantic views that are available as of last year are really powerful. So I think many people in the space might have used previously a BI tool that had a semantic layer. And in that semantic layer, you're defining join relationships and you're defining custom metrics that might have elements from multiple tables and those sorts of things. The ability to do that directly in Snowflake and then put an interface on top of it, which could be Snowflake Cortex agents and or Snowflake Intelligence, but could also be something else, is also really powerful. Again, just getting back to the source of truth is the source of truth. keeping your definitions in one place, or at least having the ability to keep your definitions in one place if you want to and choose to do that.
Let's talk about KPI development and metrics. DAS42 has a business-first consulting philosophy where we need to understand what business decisions the metrics will drive before we architect the data so that we can do so correctly. Walk me through an example where getting the data right led to a client making the best decision that they could.
So I had a client in the streaming services business who DAS42 helps them to launch the data analytics for their streaming service. So we were working with them before the service had ever launched. And then on day one of the service, we were able to get real data in dashboards flowing through. And one of the things that we encountered once we had real data coming through is that the team went, our churn rates are higher than we expected. And there must be something wrong with the churn rate. My client says, we were expecting it to be in this range and it's not. And ultimately we looked at it and went, no, this is right. Your churn rate just is higher than you thought it was going to be. And they said, well, shouldn't it be the number of people who churned divided by all customers? Because it looks like that's not what you have here. With the streaming service, many of us will know, you sign up on a given day and you're usually getting an entitlement for a month or 30 days. And so you can cancel on any day. So your cancellation rate can be the number of people who canceled divided by all customers. But your churn rate, you're only eligible to churn on one day every month. You can cancel at any point, but then you're always going to end on the 7th or whatever it is. So no, the denominator needs to be number of customers who were eligible to churn on that day. And laying that out for them and sort of, talking them through, well, this is how the process works. And this is how the numbers need to reflect that process, I think really helped them to think about the actions of churn and cancellation from a more critical lens, and then understand the outcomes of their data better, because they had been really confused about why is the cancellation rate so much lower than the churn rate? I think really sitting down and going, okay, but what's the experience of this is also something that, I've had clients who are in sort of a gig economy space going, okay, we should define the cancellation rate in this way. And when we sit down and look through it and talk about it, one of the questions that I'll encourage them to ask is, would the customer describe what they did as canceling? So if what happened was the credit card expired, that's not the customer canceling. That's not the same experience for that person. And you're not going to address that in the same way. So when you move around and think about things from the perspective of not just the end user of your data, which I think, many of us who work in data are very familiar with making the story and, thinking about our audience, but from the perspective of the person who is a data point underneath that. If I am a person who is ordering a ride sharing service, and I can't order it because my credit card is expired, that's, it's a different scenario and we would address it in a different way.